So thank you all so much for joining again. I want to introduce you all to our artist and star of the show tonight, Dario Mohr. So Dario is a New York City-based interdisciplinary artist who creates interactive sanctuary experiences. Born in 1988, Mohr received a BFA from Buffalo State College and an MFA from the City College of New York. In addition to work created in painting, sculpture, or made digitally, he often includes assembled objects to build immersive sacred spaces. These often exist in unexpected places using mundane objects. Because objects are endowed with the significance that the viewer blesses it with, his work can provide a lot of space for divergent perspectives and interpretations. The recycling of old work is also fundamental to Mohr's practice. Sometimes a previously used item provides the perfect juxtaposition to enhance or add depth to new explorations. In addition to his individual art practice, Dario Mohr is also the founder and director of Enclave Arts Alliance, Inc., which is a nonprofit for the recognition and representation of Black, Indigenous, people of color artists in contemporary art. So aside from that, I do want to give a brief introduction to our exhibition of discussion tonight. Blood is Thicker Than Water, that Separated U.S. is the solo exhibition by artist Dario Mohr, inspired by themes of family migration, Black excellence, and Lewis Latimer's contributions to science through light. Blood is Thicker Than the Water, Separated U.S. is a series of dark room projection and LED light inspired works. Situated in the history of forced migration and collective loss of recollection in ancestral lineage, Mohr's artwork draws on his own challenges to connect with his West African heritage and identity as a first-generation Grenadian American. Through his work, Mohr seeks to address the gap that exists of those who were historically held captive and other US citizens, while representing the plight of many African Americans and Caribbean American people who have assimilated to European culture out of survival. The exhibition is on view from now until July 3rd on Fridays and Saturdays, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Lewis Latimer House Museum. We hope tonight's talk will provide you with more insight into Dario Mohr's work. We will start with Dario sharing and we'll open it up for Q&A. If you have any thoughts or questions during the talk, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So without further ado, I hope you can join me in welcoming Dario.
Thank you so much, Roxy. I'm very excited for the opportunity to present this exhibit and as well as this artist talk. So we can jump right into it. Blood is Thicker Than the Water That Separated U.S. is my solo show. It is a darkroom show at Lewis Latimer House Museum. Before we get into this series, I want to share the events that catalyzed a full-on exploration into the reclamation of ancestry. That exploration was catalyzed by COVID-19. So when the pandemic hit, I could no longer enjoy my favorite pastime, which was traveling. I love to travel. It rejuvenates me, it resets me. And without the ability to do that, I ended up traveling inward, retreating and really starting to reflect on things that I've needed to for a long time. So all this reflection resulted in some art series that actually, in some ways, were inspired by Black Lives Matter, by the politics of the time, politics that we're still enduring to this day. And I had an inkling that there were stones left unturned in my life and my ethnic identity that I really needed to resolve. And art was my way to be able to process it. So the first series that kind of set the tone for this was Bloodline. So Bloodline is, it was created during my residency at Visual Muse of West Harlem Art Fund on Governor's Island in 2020. And it's a series of painted pastiches referencing Renaissance masters' work with a nod to my paternal heritage. Meanwhile, the original creation myth that's featured here, that's depicted in this series, is dedicated to my maternal heritage. So this allegory is loosely inspired by Gaia, the Bible, and a book called Homo Deus written by Yuval Harari. This visual art narrative begins with the Black mother of creation sitting atop of an acacia tree throne, providing lifeblood to her children. This is the first piece in the series, and it's called Genesis. Some of the symbolism featured in this series were later used in this show. So this Bloodline series is where some of the symbolism began that I ended up building on for The Blood is Thicker Than the Water, the Separated U.S. show that's currently on display at Lewis Latimer. And symbolism, for example, includes like this double helix, which is, featured in the painting, but then also through this leather rope, which, it's a braided rope that kind of also mimics the look of a double helix strand, as well as the greenery, some of this like faux grass and faux greenery. And also, just a depiction of an ancestor. So those are all just some images, some icons that I end up referencing down the road, leading up to this current exhibition. Just to kind of breeze through this particular show really quickly, this was a 6-piece series, and it included multiple paintings as well as some assemblage, and also just some other visual references that you'll see repeated include this triangular peak, which became another visual that I employed throughout this journey as an allusion to Christianity. You're going to see it actually reappear a few times in some other series to come. And as I said, it's a narrative. I wish I had more time to really go into depth about what this means, but I'm just going to show you a little bit of it just through these images. You can see here, this is one of the initial moments when I started trying to merge like human and plant form, specifically the Black figure with the acacia tree. And that is something that I symbolically reference in multiple series, again, leading up to the current exhibition at Lewis Latimer. And these are just the last couple pieces that were also included there. And once again, you could see that rope, the double helix rope there. So this series, that was the entire series. That was meant to continue, but was postponed because I had to give way to the new series that I was just super inspired by and felt like I really needed to jump into. That's called The Black Church. I will continue this particular narrative probably in 2023, but I needed to take a couple of years off to really start delving deeper into what my subconscious was really nagging me to pay attention to, which is to get a little bit more connected with what was missing within, my identity, and what I think a lot of other people can relate to as Black people in this country. Sort of just the lack of the full picture of our ancestral heritage and what that means spiritually, culturally, and in a lot of other ways that a lot of other people of different backgrounds in this country have the privilege of knowing and being able to access easily. I'm pressing the next button, but it's not working. Okay, let's see. There we go. So this is Black Church. This was created during my residency at Materials for the Arts in 2021. And for this, I began referencing the church as a Black citizen in the US a few years ago. I stepped away from my Christian faith as a teenager and eventually came to learn that I, like a lot of my fellow Black US citizens, had not had access to the spiritual practices of our ancestry in Africa. So at this juncture, it seemed important for me to sit with my lack of spiritual connection to my ancestors' forms of worship and create a series acknowledging this. I had previously taken a 23andMe and Ancestry DNA test, but did not know my tribal ancestry. They're not super specific. They give you a general region. So, pretty much got across West Africa, but I did not know specifically what tribe, so I was not able to do as much research as I would have probably liked for this series. But at the same time, once again, this was just me sort of processing this juncture of the unknown, but the longing to learn more. So as I said, referencing some Christian symbolism and also a little bit of West African imagery. I created this series of basically different aspects of a church. So we've got Black altar, we've got Black icon. And I want to also say that Black, I use that sort of as an abstract term to kind of denote the, people of African descent, though I am aware that Black can also be associated with darker skinned people around the world, people of Aboriginal descent from Australia and other places as well. So, I do use the word Black, which is sort of a catch-all term for a lot of groups of people, but I am specifically speaking about the African diaspora experience. And in this series, there are some other icons that I borrow for this upcoming show as well that include these Black hands holding a ring. And that's something that this is the first time that I actually created this gold ring with these hands. And at the time, I don't think I was fully cognizant of what it meant, but it ended up playing into the next series that you're going to see in a little bit. So I just want to point that out. And again, we've got that triangular peak, which is something that we saw in the last series. So again, it's some visual elements that are being borrowed and brought into future projects. This series was very projection heavy. It dealt with assemblage and projection of paintings that I digitized, old paintings that I painted years ago that I eventually digitized and then projected onto surfaces. And this was a couple of these pieces were presented at my first group exhibition in the pandemic at Chashama last year. So this is one of the pieces that was presented inside. It's called Black Chapel. And as you can see, it is projected, and I just kind of made a little mannequin figure. It's sort of inviting so that people could also sit along with it and, maybe watch the projection along with them. I wanted to really create a space, an environment that felt welcome, especially since in the pandemic, like I think a lot of people were very wary of even going to a gallery or, being in a space or sitting next to somebody. So I hope that this provided somewhat of a familiar and welcome sort of vibe for the space at the time. And then, again, I think it may be freezing up. Let's see. All right. It did freeze up. Yep, there we go. All right. So at the end of my residency in materials for the arts, I found a tombstone prop that says 2009 on it, 2019 on it. This was the series that inspired direct research into my ancestry. And this is what the tombstone looked like. Wi-Fi is not being my friend today. There we go. So that's the tombstone. I decorated it with a lot of imagery that is referential to my specific ancestry. I thought it was very important for me to speak personally, share my personal story of, just of loss of an ancestor and of a sacred or an object that I held as sacred, a precious object that was given to me from that ancestor, because I feel like a lot of people have had that experience in the pandemic. For one, just reckoning with loss of loved ones, loss of normalcy. And for me, 2019 was just, it was the last year that felt familiar. So when I saw this, I just felt like, wow, I really got to use that I've got to use that in a way that's going to resonate. So this was a work that's featured in a solo show that I did during my residency at Flux Factory called Don't Let It Slip Through Your Fingers. And this overall show took place on Mother's Day weekend in 2021. I know it says 2022, it should say 2021. And it comprises 3 pieces inside the space that were acrylic painted and include assemblages. This was really about the loss of a cherished object, specifically a ring that my grandmother had created for me from Grenada. She had a custom jeweler there create this ring. It was the most precious material object that I had owned since I was a child. So, having lost it was a big thing. I lost it in 2019. But of course, like the rest of us, especially living in New York, we don't have time to reckon with grief. We've got to keep things moving. We've got to pay the bills. We've got to move. We've got to work. And it wasn't until the pandemic hit that I really realized the gravity of that loss. So, I thought that it would be something that a lot of people could relate to. So this series was created in an attempt to fill the void, to fill this void of loss by memorializing, one second, by memorializing what/who was lost, while also acknowledging that memories are ephemeral and can get sucked into the void of time if we don't revisit them once in a while. So sometimes, like if we lose touch with something, or if we lose something, it's just out of sight, out of mind. And I was very afraid of that, because my grandmother passed away around a decade ago. And the thought that, like, not having that ring there anymore would maybe cause me to lose some of the memories of, um, memories with her. So, I think in a way I wanted to share this because I thought that it would be sort of an interesting example of how to be able to continue the memory or legacy of something that may be lost, someone or something, through creative means. So, I lost a tiny ring and I've got all this now taking up a lot of space in my studio. So, it's kind of a beautiful thing to think about loss and sort of think about how to revere it and continue the memories of it with new memories, new creative memories. In addition to the exhibition, it included physical works. I created a funeral performance titled Closed Casket in front of an audience during the Flux Factory opening, and that included a eulogy and poetry dedications. So Closed Casket is actually featured in the Lewis Latimer House opening as well, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But before that, I just want to really quickly share just a couple more pieces from this series. It included Reach for It, which is a public art show piece that was featured in the Shared Dialogue, Shared Space event, presented by Korea Art Forum in Weeping Beach Park in Flushing. So you could see, more hands, sort of reaching upward, and, just sort of me starting to incorporate that imagery now. And you're going to see more hand imagery down the road as well. But this is really the series where I started really making the hand an icon, a central element of my visual language. So to close off this series, I ended up building an altar. It was a live altar building workshop that I did at the Mitchell Housing Center. And this was made possible by a grant from City Artist Corps. So that was also a great experience. Also, these pieces, because of the feedback that I've received from them, I did decide to show them separately in some exhibitions to come. So currently on view on Governor's Island, Nolan Park, Building 10B, you can see two of the paintings that were featured in this original exhibition, as well as this third piece is going to be featured in a show in July in the Lower East Side with Art Bridge. So I'm excited to present those as well. Give them sort of really a third life, I guess. So on that note, speaking of Art Bridge, I had to kick off 2022 with an exploration into ancestry with the mural I created during my Bridging the Divide fellowship with them. So I ended up creating a mural that incorporated the hands that I had painted for that previous series. So all three of those hands are in there. In addition, I've got some hands that I had created from prints previously, and created a digital mock-up that eventually was printed in the Mitchell Housing District in the South Bronx. And this piece, well, really 2022 in general was, this year is very important. I wanted to really create a multi-borough project that would exist will really be kicked off in the Bronx. So I live in the Bronx right now, so it made sense for me to kick it off here. And that's why this is the first thing that's been exhibited. It's currently still on display. And then the next show is the one that's also currently on display at Lewis Latimer House. So I want to start off with the Bronx and then feature the next exhibition, which is a solo show in Queens. And ultimately, I'm going to have another solo show in August that's going to take place in Brooklyn, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So this is what the mural currently looks like. I love nature, so I wanted to present it in both. Well, I wanted to just give views of it in winter and springtime. This is what it currently looks like here in the bottom with the trees. And you could go and see it in person at 175 Alexander Avenue in the South Bronx. And I also want to show you some details of it. So if you look closely, in addition to the hands, the hands from the previous series, don't let it slip through your fingers, you'll see these hands as well kind of crowning this icon in the middle. And these are all actually photographs of hands that I took of residents who live in the Mitchell housing community, who were very excited about the project. They even weighed in, and we had workshops and they were included in them. And they, really had a lot of pride in their community. And I wanted to, pay that respect by taking photographs of their hands. So they volunteered their hands for this project, and I photographed them and included them in this digital vinyl mural that they put on the scaffolding here. So I really wanted to make it feel like something that for them, something that they can be proud of, that they can point out to their grandchildren or passersby, like that they're included in this. And yeah, and in addition to that, there's a lot of other symbolism. I mean, you'll see some other little Easter eggs here and there. I don't know if you can see my cursor while I'm pointing to things, but of course, we've got the double helix strand again. We've got botanical imagery. But I also wanted to give a little nod to Lewis Latimer himself, since he also, I believe, created the precursor to the air conditioner. So this work also is it addresses heat island effect, which affects red line communities disproportionately. And because of that, I wanted to include some imagery of cooling systems that would mitigate that, which I know don't exist in the Mitchell housings, but I think would be a well wish to that one day. In addition, this in general just serves as a well wish to the community, which is predominantly black and brown, and is really just a way to signal to the rest, to outside communities that this is a historically BIPOC neighborhood, and it should remain so. So that is really what I wanted to kick off this entire year with. I wanted to create something that was really connected to the African American, to the African diaspora community of the United States. And starting from that vantage point, or launching from there into the current series that's up at Lewis Latimer, which is dealing a little bit more with my recent ancestry. But before we get into that, I do want to show this icon. So this is actually, the central image that you just saw in that mural, Sow the Seeds is what it's called. And it's an acacia tree, which, once again, references the tree that the maternal figure was sitting on top of in the Bloodline series. And, I just think it's a powerful symbol. The acacia tree is really all over Africa. And it's also a biblical symbol. It was referenced in the Bible, Jeremiah 17:8. He is like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream and does not fear when heat comes. And its leaves remain green and is not anxious in the year of drought, for it does not cease to bear fruit. So many believe that is referencing the acacia tree. And also, they say the Ark of the Covenant was, created from the acacia tree. And Noah's Ark and things. So, there was some overlapping sort of biblical elements that I wanted to tie in. Um, so this is an acrylic painted piece that I ended up including in that mural, but I also am going to present this piece on its own, actually in a larger installation uh, in the show following the Lewis Latimer House show. Seem to be having a little bit of technical issues. I'm trying to get to the next page, but there we go. So with all that said, we are now moving to the current topic, which is about Grenada, which this show is about. Blood is thicker than the water that separated U.S. is specifically speaking to that heritage. And I, of course, felt like I needed to reconnect with my heritage after so many years in order to come correct with this series. So in order to properly tap into that heritage, I took a trip to Grenada with my mom to visit old stomping grounds of recent ancestors. These include, I hope you can see my cursor while I'm doing this, but these include where my great grandma used to live. I visited her when I was maybe around 7 years old. And, she pointed out the building. She pointed out a lot of other places where she used to go to church and where other aunts and uncles lived and where other relatives used to live. And it was an amazing opportunity to really get the lay of the land. And I'm very grateful for my mom for, familiarizing myself with that and reminding me of places that I had been previously as a child. So we visited our land on the island that's featured right here. We visited relatives, and just overall, it was a great opportunity and a great chance to source some materials like photographs, family photographs, and documents and things like that that inform the series overall. Before I get to that, I'll just continue. I used to visit Grenada often as a child and even traveled alone to spend a summer with my grandmother. I think I was about 8 years old. And, so I was very close with my grandmother, and sadly, she did pass away in 2013. I last visited Grenada in 2009. So it had been over a decade since I'd visited Grenada. And I think in part, I compartmentalized Grenada, associating it with my grandmother. And I think a lot of people do that. If there's someone, if there's a place or a memory that is associated with someone that you really love, even if everything else, even if you enjoyed that place, like if a central element of that, of what brought you to that place is lost, it could just like change the entire, your entire perspective on it, and, replace a positive, feeling on it with a somber one. And I think that that's what's prevented me from going back to Grenada for so long. But the pandemic really made me face, the fact that that's where my recent ancestors are from. And it's very important to, reconnect. And, if you have troubling memories, whatever they are, just, kind of try and get a better understanding of them. And, eventually you'll be able to, move past it. So we're going to get into the series really quickly, but I do want to first acknowledge the land that Grenada is on. So Grenada was formed by volcanic activity, which then resulted in land formation around 2 million years ago. I want to also acknowledge the indigenous tribes such as the Arawak and Kara people who inhabited Grenada prior to colonialism. I know how important it is to recognize the longstanding history that has led to my recent ancestors residing in Grenada and seek to understand our place within that history. I want to take a moment to shine light on the fact that indigenous people existed in Grenada for centuries, and their culture and legacy lives on in Grenada and the Lesser Antilles. I also need to acknowledge the Munzi Lenape and Matincock people whose traditional and unceded territories that the Lewis Latimer House Museum in Flushing, Queens is situated on. These are indigenous lands, and, these are all of our recent ancestries, whether we're an immigrant, everyone who isn't indigenous has very recent ancestry, has very recent experience here in the Americas. So it's always important to just acknowledge that. Jumping from there, I want to speak a little bit about Grenada's colonial history because that greatly informed the overall series. And then we're going to get into what that series is. So Christopher Columbus reportedly sighted the island on his third voyage in 1498, but he did not land on the island. And the name that he gave it was La Concepcion, which was never used. By the 1520s, it was known as La Granada after the city in Spain. By the beginning of the 18th century, the name La Grenade in France was in common use, eventually anglicized to Grenada. British colonists killed most of the Caribs and brought African slaves to work sugar plantations. In 1795, Fédon's rebellion, inspired by the Haitian Revolution, very nearly succeeded, taking significant military intervention to quell. Slavery was abolished in 1833, and in 1885, the island's capital, St. George's, became the capital of the British Windward Islands. Grenada achieved independence from Britain in 1974, following a coup by Marxist New Jewel movement in 1979. The island was invaded by United States troops and the government overthrown. This led my grandmother to send my mother to live in Brooklyn at 15 years old. She later gave birth to me in the States at the age of 22 in 1988. So that's just a brief history on colonialism leading to present day. And yeah, now we're going to get to what we're all here for, which is the exhibition at Lewis Latimer House Museum. So I really wanted to just ground us in some of the symbolism, some of the context for how we got to this point. And it's really just having time to reflect in the pandemic and try and just acknowledge some blind spots that really just didn't have time to focus on prior. So this series is, well, first I want to say this building right here is what the outside of the space actually looks like. This is Lewis Latimer. This is what his home looked like. And you'll also see a monitor inside of the gallery. Well, actually right outside of the gallery. Like when you walk in, you're going to see a monitor to your right before you enter the gallery. And that happens to have the performance Closed Casket, which was recorded at the Don't Let It Slip Through Your Fingers show. So I previously spoke about that with the funeral and the eulogy. And that performance is, you know, it's featured in the building to sort of like ground your understanding of what the series is about. So this is the exhibition. Blood is Thicker Than the Water, the Separated U.S. It is currently on display until July 3rd at Lewis Latimer House. And it is a darkroom exhibit. And this is a nod to Lewis Latimer himself and, you know, the fact that he created the carbon filament for the light bulb and was so, you know, influential in the science of light. So I'm going to go one by one. I want to first speak about, it does actually go around the room. So the first piece of the series is the poacher, which is a glass tank that has, well, it includes a glass tank, metal fish, caution tape, tactical netting, fish netting, object assemblage, and LED light. And these are some details of it. It includes the triangular peak that we spoke about, which is often featured in, as we said, Christian iconography. But at the same time, even though the triangular peak is often associated with the Holy Spirit, it is in this case betrayed by the caution tape, alluding to a more sinister agenda. The next piece that is connected to the poacher is called Big Game, which is made up of a pull-down map, tactical netting, object assemblage, astroturf, LED light, white paint, and leather braided rope. So here are some details, and I just want to speak a little bit about this piece as well. Big Game really involves just sort of like the thought of like hunting for sport, the sport of hunting people from one land, uh, eventually becoming the sport of the prey, the sport of the hunted, having to compete against each other for rations and to curry favor in the field just to survive. Um, and then I extended the Caribbean map's longitude and latitude lines. You can see them here. I extended those lines to then to the floor where they create chalk lines that mimic a game field, but then also the chalk, but also a chalk outline alluding to the fact that it is a crime scene. So I really wanted to give sort of like a cognitive dissonance of it being somewhat playful, at least in the eyes of, maybe the colonizers, but then also a foreboding space. And the last thing I'm going to say about this is it does also, once again, reintroduce that braided rope, which you could see is spanning different islands and locations around South America and the Caribbean. That rope was initially introduced in the Bloodline series, and each point in this map that is touching on represents a country where I have maternal relatives according to Ancestry DNA and 23andMe. So when you sign up for that test, when you take the test, it shows you a list of DNA relatives. And I looked it up and I saw that a lot of them happen to come from these specific countries, Guyana, Venezuela, Barbados, Trinidad, and many others. So I thought that that was very important also to include. And this braided rope actually connects to this next piece. The next piece is called conjoined helixes, and it is made up of chandelier, leather, rope, gold rings, object assemblage, and LED light. And I'm sure that you remember me referencing the gold rings earlier. And of course, it was referenced in both Black Church and Don't Let It Slip Through Your Fingers. And here the rope is actually curling around this structure obviously being a nod to Lewis Latimer himself, who, was a pioneer when it comes to light. And also it alludes to time. So this whole piece, I wanted it all to connect with my audience, just in terms of like the severing of the history of people that were brought over as slaves, the history of where they came from, and the connections we had to make, even after we've dispersed. Some of us, like my mother, left Grenada and, but stayed in contact through long distance telephone and, other methods at the time. So, it's only until very recently that we have texting and WhatsApp and things to be able to maintain, and social media to maintain regular communication. So, I think, this piece I really wanted to acknowledge just the, how things get lost in transition, relying on oral stories from family members that, may not always translate properly, and just ultimately just losing. And also just, the systematic eradication and of traditional and African indigenous cultural and spiritual practices, and the assimilation into European beliefs. So here are just some details and just some other install shots. Here we've got one of these two pieces connected. I think it may be doing that stalling thing again. There we go. Got another detail here. I've actually got this figure. So this is a figure that I've actually included in a lot of series. I actually had 3 of these. I collected a few of these, and I got them from Grenada, and I wanted it to feature sort of a progression, sort of a progression. So when you see the figure in each of them, I'll let you sort of like connect the dots, how you see them, what you think what your interpretation is, and I would love to hear it. So this is the next piece. It is called the Spice Isle, and this is made of a map of Grenada. There actually weren't a lot of maps of Grenada, so I had to have this custom made, and a video projection onto the map, as well as object assemblage and artificial plants. So once again, we got the artificial plants visual language taken from Bloodline. And all of these are very new. All these specific references and symbolisms and imagery and things are somewhat recent, really inspired by the pandemic. So it's it's exciting to kind of connect the dots, and see sort of how it's come along for me. And yeah, with this particular piece as well, it does have some of my traditional tropes, which is basically including objects that are reverential. I've been doing that for years before the pandemic, and this series is no different. Including different objects that I've sourced from Materials for the Arts, as well as from Grenada. So while I was there, I was definitely busy getting a lot of materials that I thought would add some food for thought for the series. So these are just some additional shots. And in this, you'll also see this other piece here at the bottom that's sitting on the floor. This piece is called Coat of Arms, and it is a floor decal that is basically just a digital collage, sort of a remixed version of the traditional Grenadian coat of arms. And really, the reason that I put it on the floor, like when you think about a federal building or like a political office, you sometimes envision like a floor decal with a crest or a symbol of the government. And I wanted the series to read as both spiritual and politically charged. And it is as I said, it's like a remix of the coat of arms. So it, eliminates some elements that I thought were antiquated. Grenada prides itself in being very, and being independent. And obviously Grenada is a Black nation, and, it's come so far. And I think, just inspired by that, I just wanted to switch it up a little bit, what the crest looks like. So some of the images some of the vestiges of colonialism were replaced by culturally and ancestrally relevant iconography. This specifically the case with the shield. I'll actually go to the next one. You can see that there are some clear differences with the shield in terms of the shape, as well as some of the imagery that's featured on it. The imagery referencing my ancestry, and with the Adinkra symbols being of the Akan people, as well as some of the flora included. And of course, the banner itself that says, ever conscious of the original says, ever conscious of God we aspire, build and advance as one people. And this version says, ever conscious of our ancestry, we aspire, build and advance as one people. So, just wanted to include something that was a little bit more political in this series. And then from there, it takes us to the next piece, which is called Tentacles Across the Sea, which is composed of a video projection on framed map, and as well as some assemblage aspects and some LED lights. So this piece actually features video footage of us walking on our land in Grenada. And, I really wanted to use this old world map. It was actually like a synchronicity that I found this map, because I was about to purchase a large scale decal of this exact map. And then I went to Materials for the Arts, and they happen to have the exact map in a frame. And I thought that'll work. And, I think that I think that it was, it just made for a fun challenge to kind of make it work. But I think in a way, I really like the way that when you project onto like a rectangle, it just kind of, no matter how you think, like it'll always sort of remind you of like a TV. So I really like that visual element, but I really think that this imposing your experience onto something sort of ugly, like a conquistador's take on a map from like the 1600s, I think or from the 1500s, actually, I think it's from. I believe this is a Dutch map. Um, I wanted to sort of reclaim uh, this narrative that's depicted here with something that's both personal but also uh, empowered. To own land as a Black person is something that I think is it's just a luxury that not a lot of people have, and it's something that I think um, is aspirational, and I hope that it's seen that way. And again, we've got some imagery that we've spoken about before, and these are just some additional shots. You can even see somebody out there watching the closed casket video. So if you're from the outside and you missed it, you can see sort of like where it's supposed to be in there. And yeah, the last piece of the series is called Revelations Across Generations. And this is a digital art vinyl print on Pavilion, which is, it just features the progression of, from me back in time to, my ancestors on both my mother's paternal and maternal sides. And this is currently on display, so you can go and see it. And as you know, I love nature, so I love seeing how it looks in other lights. So we've got it in the wintertime, and then we've also got it in the springtime, different views. And here it kind of orients you with scale. You get a better idea of what it looks like in terms of the size of it. And that is the entire series. Now, if you want to come and see it in person, I want to let you know that there will be a workshop that I'll be conducting called Happy Planting Day on Juneteenth. And that is going to include greeting cards with African daisies, which are eventually going to be planted on in my following show that's going to take place in August, and I'm going to speak about it in a little bit. But this workshop is meant to encourage the BIPOC identifying audience of Flushing, Queens, and just all over New York City to pen a greeting card message to their deceased ancestors. These will later be planted, as I said, on the grounds of Old Stone House. Really next year is when we're going to be able to plant it, because by the time the Old Stone House show takes place, it'll be too late in the season. So speaking of Old Stone House, this is what it looks like. This is a Quaker house that was eventually, it was, I believe that it was abandoned. I believe that they rebuilt it even. And it's pretty true to life, true to its time period and the way that it was built. And this is what the inside, the gallery looks like. And I'm going to have an additional show that's going to be featured here. And that's going to be the last show of this this 3-borough overall art project. I really wanted to hit all 3 predominantly BIPOC boroughs of New York City. So starting off in the Bronx, where I live, and then of course Lewis Latimer House in Flushing, Queens, and Park Slope in Brooklyn. So that'll be August 21st. That's when the opening is. This particular series is a departure because it's actually specifically related to my African ancestry. So if we think back to the series that I was speaking about with called Black Church, where I was, creating from a place of, just trying to, understand and reckon with, the lost knowledge of my ancestors, and, like a very aspirational series. This one was actually informed by research that I was able to obtain from African ancestry DNA, which provided me with certificates of ancestry. They took my DNA and they've got the largest database of people of African descent's DNA, and were able to definitively let me know that on my mother's maternal side, we are descended from the Akan people from Ghana, and my mother's paternal side, we are descended from the Ga people. So this is very exciting. It's something that I wish I knew many years ago in my childhood even. And now I've got a lot of work to do in terms of research. So I'm actually going to be traveling to Africa this summer. In a similar vein is when I went to Grenada to do some research and reconnect with family. I'm going to be going to Africa for the first time. And I'm going to be visiting Ghana, Togo, Benin, and Nigeria because they all happen to show up in my 23andMe ancestry. And it's believed that the Ga people also traveled through Nigeria and then Benin, Togo to get to Ghana. So I felt like it was necessary to also make my way over there. So this is a series that I'm very excited about. You can look forward to that this August. And yeah, that's my presentation. And I really appreciate your sticking with me and hearing all about it.
Thank you so much, Dario, for your talk. We have about 5 minutes to 7, which is when we say the talk will end. But I want to open the floor up for folks. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, please feel free to unmute yourself and share with all of us. Otherwise, I'm also happy to comment, but I don't want to take up too much space. I also just want to point out there may be a technical issue with people joining the call. So this might not even be everyone, Dario. Just an apology from our end. Yeah, which is
people needed a code apparently.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what is going on, unfortunately.
It's all good.
But but
no,
about while you were presenting, I do want to add the point because there was the piece that you have about with the telephone and the golden rings that were connected, and so I put it in the chat. But it's basically I like how it's connected also to Lewis Latimer because Lewis Latimer actually contributed to the patents that Alexander Graham Bell submitted for the telephone. February 14, 1876. It's very easy to remember because I just think of it as Valentine's Day on in 1876. But unfortunately that's a legacy that not a lot of people know about, or Lewis Latimer only written about it in his journal like towards later in his life, and we only unearthed that because of Winifred, his granddaughter, that was doing some family historical research as well. So I think what you're doing is very important. Yeah,
that's actually why I included the telephone as well. And thanks for catching me with that because I've completely forgot to mention that when I was showing that piece.
But I think that the aspect of family history that you talk about, like it's really like embedded in every element of your work that I really appreciate and connect with.
Thank you. Thank you, Roxy. Yeah, I really appreciate your feedback and your just your help throughout this whole process. You've just been fantastic with the just installing it, setting up the show for success and everything, and moderating the talk. So yeah, really thank you so much, Roxy.
No, please.
Sorry, can I ask a question to Rebecca for Stoop? I unfortunately was not able to join until around 6:30. So I may have missed something, but I'm so glad that I caught you talking about sow the seeds for as much as I could. But considering your work really in this moment is about exploring your ancestry, was there a specific moment where that shifted? Like, what were you doing before? Was it always of interest in your art practice?
To be honest, I spoke a little bit about a series called Black Church. I'm not sure if you were on during that, but that series was really me reckoning with just sort of like a blind spot to my explorations in spirituality. Like a lot of my series previously, they involve altars, they involve shrines. That's been a visual language and just a concentration of mine for some years now. And I think that's been inspired by just my sort of agnostic but sort of pantheist leaning, my sort of like sort of existential crisis like that I've just needed to process through art, and my holding stock in soul and spirituality and things, but not really having a doctrine. So like finding my own way to grapple with new novel ideas on spirituality and new ways to consider spirituality, and then even eventually kind of forming my own rituals through, live assemblage and things like that. A lot of that was sort of what I was doing prior. I created a different series that is sort of more well known for the materials for the arts residency that I did, called Archetypes of Visual Soundtrack, which was a really fun series to create that really had nothing to do with any of this, and I omitted it for that reason. But yeah, I mean, I did and still create work that it's, just sort of like my musings on spirituality, sort of not related, decontextualized from any organized religion. And I think at this point, I kind of was like, I've been speaking about spirituality for a while, but I haven't actually taken like a good look at, the spirituality of my ancestors, and like the fact that I should, as somebody who but I also am aware that like there wasn't a lot of information. I didn't have the resources for some time to be able to discover, like, what tribal group and what their spirituality was. But now I can, equipped with that knowledge, I can go to Africa and I can visit, uh, spiritual places, and maybe, be involved in some spiritual practices and things that are happening out there. And, also maybe incorporate some objects and things that are reverential to the experience in this series that I'm going to present in August.
Cool. Thank you for
Thanks,
sharing
Rebecca.
that.
I appreciate that question.
Is there anyone else who would like to share your thoughts or questions with us?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dario, you mentioned earlier that performance is also part of the work you do. And I recently went to an exhibition from Tavares Stratton, and that exhibition not only included his visual work, but also it was a theatrical performance that was part of the entire exhibition. And I was wanting to know, like, are you going to include more performance in your work and integrate that more into the work that you do?
That's a great question, Charisse. I appreciate that. I do. I feel like I would like to incorporate that in each new series that I would present to the public. Not every series I create gets a chance to like be put out there. But I would love to do that, either a performance or a workshop. So this time around, I'm doing a workshop for both Lewis Latimer House, which is going to take place during Juneteenth on, I believe that's Saturday, June 18th. And then I'm also going to do a workshop for Old Stone House, which will be announced after the exhibition is open. But yeah, I think I do enjoy performances. I'm getting a little bit more out of my shell because honestly, I am somewhat of a shy person. So, making myself the central element is a little bit nerve-wracking, but I think it's also exciting and something that I'm up for the challenge for. So I do want to push myself to do more performances, although I think the workshops are sort of what I've been leaning to for the rest of this year.
Is there anyone else who would like to share any thoughts, questions? And I would love to see a performance through. I have friends who also dance, and I feel like there's something that new energies that can come out, right? Like, or presenting ideas like through different mediums. So I will want to ask this question, but I also know we're running like past our end time. But just a really quick question I do have is I guess what got you into like working with this medium? I feel like that was something that wasn't exactly covered, right? Like in terms of how you began your journey as an artist. I don't know if you would mind sharing that with us.
Oh, okay. When you say this medium, do you mean assemblage, or do you mean like the dark room?
I
Like
think more so of like why start making physical works, I guess, or like how did you get into visual arts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I got into it. I feel like I just always did it. Like ever since I don't know, I was just one of those kids that always made art. And, I guess I was lucky that art teachers were always using my work as exemplars, and that just motivated me to keep making art from a young age. And I just, I don't know, I was always affirmed for it and I always enjoyed it. So I think it just like reinforced itself. But I started off really, yeah, it was a winding road. I mean, I started off drawing, and eventually I was really interested in being a cartoonist. So I created like a whole like cartoon like universe, a whole, cartoon universe of characters and even comic like superheroes and things like that. And then I discovered I could paint my senior year of high school. And that's when I realized that I wanted to just take on a completely different track. And then, I went to college for painting, and I really was a painter for some years, and I dabbled in some assemblage here and there, but it wasn't until I went back to grad school at City College where I started really, creating freestanding sculptures and assemblages and installations. So, that's really been sort of where a lot of my visual language came from, with the altars and sort of creating sacred spaces and the gallery context or alternative spaces and public spaces.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out. I really appreciate it.
And before we close out, I'm just going to ask one last time, right? Like if folks wanted to share any thoughts or comments. Thank you all so much. Just before you leave, I do want to ask you all to participate in a quick poll. We're trying to get a sense, because we've been doing online programming for a while now at the Lewis Latimer House Museum, and want to gauge to see if this is the best day or time for folks to join. I understand we're all here now, but we want to get a sense of if it were on like a Tuesday, or if we're on a weekend at a different time, maybe that would have been more preferable. So I'm just gonna start the poll now. If folks can take like a minute to answer it. So it will have two questions, one on which is the best day and which is the best time that you feel for you to join an online event like this one that we're hosting tonight. If you all can answer that, that'll be really helpful. If not, that is fine too. But again, we really appreciate you coming out tonight, and you're able to join despite some of the technical issues that had plagued other folks, unfortunately.
I know my mom was like, "Oh, I can't get on." And I'm like, "Mom, it would be perfect for you to
No,
be here. It's all good."
I'm so
I'm
sorry.
like, of all people.
The thing is,
I would
I
have put her
just
on the spot and
saw.
everything. I would have been like, "Hey, mom, go ahead and show your face."
Oh no.
Oh, it's all
Yeah,
good. It's all good.
we definitely have to. We'll have to do better next time. We just have to. I'm so sorry we missed that moment.
It's all good. The next thing is in person. So Juneteenth. Yeah, if you can make it out, it'll be great to see you.
Yeah, and thank you all so much again. Thank you, Dario.
Thank you, Roxy. Thank you, everybody.
All right. I think most of you have responded to the poll. So we're going to close out the call for tonight. And we hope you can join us for other programs in the future. Like Dario mentioned, we have the Juneteenth event that's coming up on June 18th, but we also have a public reading that will be happening in person as well at the museum on June 4th, which is 2 Saturdays from now. So we have a really packed program. We hope you can join us, and there will be more online events down the line. Actually, Cherise herself will be running a series with us.
Oh,
Not to put her on the spot,
yeah,
she's here. And where she'll be it's I don't know if Cherise, you would like to speak on it really quickly, and then we can close out.
Yeah, it's called the Reverbtions Lab, and it's part of my poetry project called Quantum. And basically, I'm inviting people to be part of my writing process, and it'll be a mixture of me doing a presentation on the work and research I'm doing so far, as well as a workshop with prompts.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Charisse. And yes, all this information is on a website and also our social media if you follow it. So yeah, looking forward to connecting in the future. And thank you all so much again for joining tonight. All right, bye everyone.